I've canceled the August recess. We have a lot of important work to do. Just to sum it up, I think we have enough work to do for the American people that we should be here during these weeks. I hope we'll get greater cooperation, but everybody should anticipate that we will be here as I announced today.
That was Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell announcing Tuesday that senators won't be getting an August break. McConnell is blaming Democrats, saying they're stalling the confirmation of almost 300 presidential nominees. Let's bring back in our panel. And Caitlin, I'm going to start with you. What is behind this cancellation?
Well, we talk a lot about how the House map is good for Democrats. Remember, the Senate map is very good for Republicans this year because they are competing in about 10 states where Democrats are currently incumbents and where Donald Trump won by a lot. At least half of those won by a lot. And so the strategy here is a political one, right? If you can keep these Democrats in August recess from going back to their home states and campaigning, Republicans see that as an advantage. It also gives them an advantage to say, look, we're staying here, we're doing our work. Democrats are the ones that are obstructionist. I would note, however, that, the work week, as we know.
Thank you.
The work week, as I know from covering the Hill, is 2.5 days, right?
Yeah.
So this isn't really that much of a cut. They come in Monday night, if that, Tuesday morning, leave Thursday afternoon, and they're back in their district.
Yeah.
So we have to think of this as a purely kind of political messaging proposal.
So before I get the reaction from Dems, Ed, as the CBS News political correspondent roving the halls of Capitol Hill, tell us, what is your sense?
You don't rove on Mondays, you don't rove on Fridays. If they wanted to get this work done, you could start things at 9 a.m. on a Monday. You could go until 5 p.m. on a Friday. They don't.
So it's pretty transparent here.
Yes. And this is total sham. Look, Harry Reid did this back in the day to the Republicans when Democrats had control. McConnell's doing it now. And you saw him there at the end say, if we get our work done, maybe we'll free ourselves up. And that might mean that they only are coming in on Tuesday and Wednesdays in August. Yeah. The only people who benefit, the airlines, because they're going to have to keep flying lawmakers back and forth to Washington. And remember, this doesn't apply to the House. It's just in the Senate.
And they still get the first week of August off.
Right.
So we're talking about a couple of weeks here.
So the lobbyists are really upset they have to come back from their big vacations.
And typically they get most of October off, especially in the midterm.
So, Hari, tell me about Democrats, though. I mean, this is something that is not necessarily, as Ed points out, it's not necessarily a new tactic. Nevertheless, it's a critical year.
I would say, with Mitch McConnell referring to stalled nominations, I think there's hundreds of, if not thousands, of Obama nominees who never got a hearing that are rolling their eyes right now. And it's also funny. Mitch McConnell started his career. This goes way back to the 80s, but Mitch McConnell started his career essentially attacking an incumbent around not showing up. Not going to work, and there was an entire series of ads with bloodhounds talking about where his opponent was, and that the bloodhounds could track him down because he wasn't at work. So
if
this
you're
is
a Democrat, what are you doing now?
If you're a Democrat, you're gonna go home eventually, as folks have pointed out. You're gonna have time to go home. You're gonna be able to work. But I think the Democrats are gonna go out, and this is actually, for a lot of Democrats this year, standing up to the Trump administration, standing up to Mitch McConnell is actually really good politics for them. The base is enthusiastic. This is going to be a base election in a lot of ways, and giving them an opportunity to speak to that base, I think is actually probably good for the Democrats.
You're nodding your head, Leslie.
Well, what's interesting about that, you talk about these swing districts, not even the few that we're talking about in California, but more so in the kind of the New South or the Plains states. Most of those have some similarities that they are contrarian. That these individuals who are running are contrarian to their party. They act much more independent. They're wealthier. They're more white. They're less ethnically diverse. They have health insurance and they're higher educated. If you put those pieces together and you start looking at the map, a lot of what you're saying in terms of incumbency and how they're going to challenge this president is going to make a lot of sense. More so for as we get closer to November, not necessarily right now.
All right, and I want to switch gears here and talk about White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. She had a really contentious exchange with journalist April Ryan at Tuesday's briefing, and Sanders was basically wrapping up saying, one last question, and at that point she was attempting to call on another reporter. April Ryan repeatedly presses her on this issue of President Trump's views on the protest during the national anthem. Let's listen to some of that.
There's an underlying issue, and it just keeps going about disrespect of the flag and soldiers. There are black and brown soldiers that fight in the military as well who feel that taking a knee, bringing attention to police-involved shootings is something that this White House should deal with. Is the president aware that taking the knee is about police-involved shootings?
The president has made his position crystal clear, and that it's about. I let you rudely interrupt me and your colleague. I'm going to ask that you allow me to finish my answer. I would be happy to answer it if you would stop talking long enough to let me do that. The president has made his position crystal clear on this topic. He feels strongly that standing for our national anthem is something that we should do, something that matters to what makes our country special and unique and what sets us apart. He's not going to waver on that, and he's not going to apologize for it. And frankly, more than 70% of Americans agree with him on that matter. If you go back to what the original intent was, this has been made a political argument of which the president is not going to back down from, and he's been clear on it.
All right, it should be noted, Sarah Sanders says, rudely interrupted. The other reporter, by the way, said, quote, I'm always happy to yield to a colleague. So he was not at all bothered by April's question. But Ed, the question I have is, how should we interpret what we heard from the podium there from Sarah Sanders in not answering April's question and providing the answer that she did give?
They have a strategy at the White House right now of continuing to talk about this in the way the president feels he should be talking about it, which is just this idea of, respect for the flag, respect for the anthem, and not acknowledging that, as April said, there are people who do this because they have concerns with law enforcement policy, basically. And look, the White House believes this is an issue that works for them. It's a good wedge issue, a good societal or cultural one. He's already forced the NFL to implement a new policy. The White House believes they have helped drag down the ratings of the NFL, which, let's remember, is an organization with which he was at odds with back in the 80s and 90s when he was a businessman trying to start his own football league. And they're going to continue to do it because here we are discussing it when we're not discussing the other things that are afflicting this administration. And they're not necessarily doing anything else but continuing to raise this issue, which has worked wonders for him, I think, and for that issue.
And fighting with the press. I mean, that's
another no-brainer.
Red meat for his base.
Absolutely.
Right. Caitlin, let me ask you, the president canceled this Tuesday appearance that was scheduled to go with the Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champions, and the president held instead an event focused on the national anthem. Give us a sense of the political calculus here. I mean, Ed just touched on it. I mean, this particular issue, the cultural focus like this, seems to be a strategy to try to really resonate with the base.
Certainly. This is something that the White House is pushing forward, that the president is pushing forward, and this is important in the context of our larger conversation about the midterm elections. The president clearly sees this as an issue to drive in the elections. Now, Republicans on the Hill say, we like to talk about tax reform, we like to talk about the economy. Well, this is something that the president believes and has actually shown in 2016, this kind of division type of politics has been effective for him. And so Republicans have to think about how that is going to play with the voters that they want to attract. I also think it's important to note that parsing through the White House statements on this issue, they said that the Philadelphia Eagles were going to provide a smaller number of teammates to this event. And so the president canceled it and then made it about the anthem issue. And I think it's really important to point out that the Philadelphia Eagles, none of the members of that team knelt during the national anthem.
That's a really important point.
And, so it's the president making this the issue, and I think that speaks to the larger strategy.
Yeah. You want to say something, Leslie?
It doesn't help Republicans what I'm about to say, but I'm saying that in many ways, part of the strategy is to be tone deaf to all of the counter arguments that this is really they never bowed their knee, they never did this. No, that's what this whole issue is about.
Is it a short-sighted strategy, though, Leslie? I wonder. Ultimately, for the Republican
Party. What is
Party?
the short sight? In other words,
for the Republican Party,
if it's effective and you win and it causes that wedge issue, because there was another part of that press conference where Sarah attacked the media again and said, if you did your job instead of attacking me and reported the information I gave you, then viewers and voters would understand what we're actually doing. I mean, she pushed back very aggressively on that, and I think that was a point. So they came back with all the facts. You know, you can misinterpret, but this is an administration that is going to stick to that line and frame the issue the way the president wants it framed, and it's going to be about respect for the military, the respect for our flag.
All right.